The shamanic tradition likely extended from the dawn of modern human beings, let's say approximately 350,000 years ago, until the present day. There are still societies that are essentially shamanic in their traditions extant on the earth, especially in places like the Amazonian jungle, although they're becoming more rare. There's a pattern to the shamanic rituals, which is, if properly understood, in my understanding, equivalent to analysis of the potentially creative breakdown of the individual human personality and its reconstitution on more solid grounds. So it's an early variant of the notion of death and rebirth as the pathway to progression upward, both psychologically and socially. And I think, and I'll show you in the course of this course, the existence of that pattern at every level of psychological analysis that we're going to engage in. I think it constitutes the core, which I referred to earlier, that unites all of the schools of personality theory and investigations into psychopathology that we'll cover. You can decide for yourself as you walk through this whether or not you find the evidence compelling. I think that one of the reasons that it's compelling, and this is actually a technical description of what makes a fact compelling, is that it occurs in multiple contexts that are independent from one another, right? So one of the ways that you judge the reality of something is whether it makes itself manifest to various independent modes of measurement. So that's why you have 5 senses, right? You can see something that isn't there. It's less likely that you will see and hear something that isn't there. It's less likely still that you'll see, hear, and touch something that isn't there. But that's enough. Not enough. You have 2 other senses just to nail things down. And even more than that, we're still skeptical, which is why if I believe something is real, I might ask you, and look for consensus across all 3 of you to help me adjust the potential error of my perceptions. That's what you do when you use multiple methods of measurement, which is something, by the way, formally recommended by the psychometric psychologists who've been endeavoring to determine when a psychological measurement is real as a measurement, but also reflective of something real in the world. It's real if it can be detected in a variety of distinguishable and separate manners. And so the pattern that I'm going to lay out for you that characterizes the shamanic pattern of transformation does make itself manifest at multiple levels of analysis, and we'll use it as a uniting structure as we progress through the various theories. Now, I also think and hope, know for that matter, that you'll find this personally relevant, because understanding the pattern of personality transformation can help you maintain your faith when things fall apart, knowing, as you hopefully will come to, that having things fall apart at different levels of depth is actually a precursor to transformation such that things come together more reliably and productively. And understanding as well, and this is something absolutely fundamental, that to the degree that you can engage in the process of personality dissolution and its reconstitution voluntarily, your chances of success and your freedom from anxiety and your ability to maintain hope will be much, much improved. And so all of that's locked into the shamanic practices. And so we'll do an overview of that now, as well as a relatively deep dive into the abstract structure of the processes of transformation that the shamanic rituals both constitute and refer to. We'll start with the shamanic foundation, and then we'll close this first lecture with an analysis of the relationship between the Judeo-Christian conceptualization of personality and its transformations, which is determinative for all the psychological theories that we're going to consider, all protestations of the practitioners of those schools of thought to the contrary. I'll show you the relationship between these Judeo-Christian ideas, which are ancient in their own right, and the underlying shamanic substrate, let's say, that's far more archaic even than those traditions. We'll talk about descent into the underworld and reconstitution, because that's the essential nature of the shamanic endeavor. Upward striving, descent into the underworld, and reconstitution. You know how it is in your life. You have periods of time where you encounter something initially incomprehensible and profoundly difficult, and things fall apart around you and within you, and maybe there you are for some indeterminate period of time in the underworld, right, suffering the torments of hell, but you emerge stronger and wiser, now able to deal with and to understand things that were beyond you to begin with. Well, that's the characteristic pattern of human adaptation. As such, there's no learning without at least a small death, which is part of the reason that we're eternally resistant even to the learning that might transform us. Now, if you understand that, and you'll come to understand that more deeply in consequence of this class, you may be able to see not that every treasure has a dragon, let's say, but that every dragon has a treasure, which is an unbelievably useful thing to know as you encounter the difficulties that will beset you as you make your way through life. There's an insistence beginning with the shamanic practitioners themselves that the manner in which we encounter the unknown elements of life tears us into pieces before reconstituting us. And if we can understand that process and accept it and even welcome it and even worship it, you might say, then we're best positioned to transform ourselves when necessity makes either doing that or dying necessary. So what'll we examine in the Judeo-Christian tradition today, somewhat briefly? The notions of pride, self-consciousness, sin, and the fall of man that characterize the opening chapters of Genesis. The notion that personality can transform, but that that's a consequence of humility. First, you're wrong, you admit it, you would like to change, and you're willing to, which Carl Rogers identified as the precondition for any successful psychotherapeutic endeavor, right? You have to come to the agent of change, let's say the therapist, knowing or hoping that you have something to learn in some manner to change in a beneficial way, even if that's going to be painful to you, as a precondition for the transformative process to even begin. That's identical to the proclamation that religious humility, which is the opposite of the greatest sin, which is that of pride, is the precondition for atonement. At one meant the pulling of yourself back together and the uniting of that integrated self with, you might say, the world and the spirit of the world, the pulling together of that, and redemption, which is your ascent out of Dante's Inferno and the abyss back